Hey, welcome back, everyone. My name is Meshach, pastor of Friendship United Methodist Church in Cincinnati, Ohio. And in today's video, I'm going to be talking about the role of anger, specifically when working towards racial justice. Because if there's one thing that we can all agree on, it's this. Issues of racial justice are infuriating, especially when you consider that America's great sin had to do with the sin of racial injustice by way of slavery. And one would think that we've learned a lesson by now, but the fact that it's been going on for such a long time just increases the anger. So when we see videos of a George Floyd or a Breonna Taylor, when you see the disparity between minority communities and white communities, or as it happened to me and many people recently, when you read stories of how long it takes to simply vote in black communities versus white communities, or maybe you've even experienced racial injustice or it's happened to someone you know, all of those experiences tend to make your blood boil to a certain degree. Indeed, if you haven't been angry at all in the last few months with all the upticks in racial injustice, we need to have a different talk. So in light of the fact that there's so many reasons to be angry, I'm making this video to help people begin thinking about the role that anger plays when working towards racial justice. So first of all, I think it's important to understand what anger is. So anger is simply, I like to think of it like an alarm clock that lets you know that something is wrong. It simply draws your attention to something that's happening that you don't want to happen. For example, if someone cuts you off in traffic, or if you learn that someone's been spreading lies about you, or maybe you learn that your kids are misbehaving, all of those situations can trigger anger because something's happening that you don't think should be happening, and the fact that it is happening causes anger to begin flaring up on the inside of you. So in that sense, anger is a normal thing. We shouldn't think of it as an abnormal thing, but it's a normal emotion because it draws our attention towards a problem or a situation that needs to be addressed. But now the important question is, what do we do with it? Once we've become angry at something, what are we going to do with the anger? Because some people would like to think that you should use the anger or channel it into something positive. But I think that's actually a dangerous and potentially disastrous approach, because you may start out using anger, but you'll discover that anger has eventually begun using you. So if we think about anger as an alarm clock again, it's good when the alarm clock goes off, right? Because now we know that something's wrong. The alarm clock has awakened us to the fact. But usually with alarm clocks, we shut them off after we've become awake, right? The people who think you can channel anger are essentially advising you to walk around with an alarm clock going off in your ears all day long. And just imagine how your day might be impacted if you're doing something with that annoying sound blaring in your ears throughout the day. It's safe to say that everything you did would be affected by that noise, right? Well, this is what anger does when we embrace it or we try to channel it. It touches everything that we do. And since anger is connected so deeply with our feelings, when we act out of anger, we'll typically focus on trying to make the other person feel the way that we were made to feel. This is why toddlers, for instance, go back and forth with name calling, or why grown-ups go back and forth. Someone cuts you off in traffic, what do you want to do? You want to cut them off in traffic. Well, you made me feel a certain way, I'm going to try to make you feel the same way. That's what anger does. And even though this may feel good initially, it never leads towards any kind of meaningful change, does it? You've all experienced it. You've reacted, someone made you feel one way, you make them feel the other way, but at the end of the day, nothing good comes out of it. It just creates a kind of circular behavior where people keep on attacking one another rather than dealing with the actual problem. So what needs to happen is that we turn the alarm clock off by setting anger aside. This requires emotional intelligence, folks. You recognize that you're angry, but from that point on, anger has done its job. It's drawn your attention to the fact that something's happening that's against your will. But from that point on, if anger remains present in what happens next, it's going to impact what you do. Therefore, set it aside, turn the alarm clock off. You don't need it for whatever's going to happen next. As Dallas Willard, one of my favorite Christian teachers, once said, there's nothing that can be done with anger that cannot be done better without it. And he's exactly right. By setting anger aside, we'll be enabled to see the situation more clearly and decide on what the best response might be, and then act with wisdom. James, the brother of Jesus, once said, human anger does not bring about the kind of justice that God desires. And what is the kind of justice that God desires? Well, first of all, it's not punitive justice. God isn't out here trying to punish people and make them feel bad because they made others feel bad or because they made him feel bad. But the kind of justice that God desires is restorative justice. That means God wants to see people be restored into what he originally intended for them to be when he created them. And if we want to participate in that work, we cannot do that work from a spirit of anger, but it has to come from a spirit of love. So we set aside anger and then we clothe ourselves in love, or we put on love, because love is simply a willingness for good to happen in another person's life. So let's say that someone has acted in a prejudicial manner towards you. You became angry and you want to make them feel the way that you feel. But now you set anger aside and you're determined to not just let it go, but to actually work towards justice with your actions emerging from love. Well, what might you do? Well, you might begin by asking yourself, what's the best thing that could happen to this person who's just demonstrated that they're governed by implicit prejudicial biases? Now, the person who's embraced anger or is trying to channel their anger might say, the best thing that happened to them is to post a video of them online and expose them to all the world that they're a racist such and such. And you know, in some cases, maybe that's just a thing a racist person needs to happen to them. Sometimes people need to be exposed in order for them to change. But in general, a person who's operating from love might say the best thing to happen to this person who's prejudiced in their thinking would be for them to not be prejudiced anymore, but to adopt a more charitable mindset. So maybe instead of intentionally setting out to make them feel the way that they made you feel, you might set out to help them overcome their implicit biases by drawing into a closer relationship with them. You might set out to help them become a better person who could live a better life. This is the kind of justice that God desires. And the world will become a better place, not with the destruction of racially motivated people, but with the transformation of racially motivated people. To do this work, we have to set anger aside. We let it inform us of the problem, but then we must set it aside so that we can do the real and meaningful work of creating a more just and equitable society. Does this sound too marvelous for you? I'm sure it does to some. Maybe too Pollyanna? Well, the dream that America could one day become a just and equitable society also seems too marvelous. But marvelous ends require marvelous means. One person who adopted this approach once said, "Darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that." Well, thanks for watching, guys. I'm going to make one more video in this series before addressing some other important subjects. The final video is going to be on the need to engage difficult conversations more, not less, especially in the days we're living in, and to have those conversations not in groups that we identify with, but as a person talking to another person. So subscribe if you're interested in hearing that. Thank you so much for watching, and I appreciate all your support. Peace, and take care, folks.